Che ne dite? Allora, bentrovati. Io sono Maurizio Pesce, sono un giornalista di Wired e con la nostra rivista ci occupiamo di molti temi dell'innovazione, tra cui quelli ovviamente del food, che ultimamente si inizia a intersecare molto e sempre di più anche con il cibo. Abbiamo poco più di un'ora, abbiamo 8 relatori, quindi non perdo tempo e inizierei a parlare con loro e insieme a voi di come sta cambiando il mondo dell'innovazione nel mondo del cibo. Tra tutti questi relatori c'è chi in qualche modo è stato coinvolto con Expo, ovviamente in un ruolo o nell'altro tutti quanti sono intervenuti alla manifestazione l'anno scorso, c'è chi si occupa più di start-up, chi si occupa più invece di finanziamenti, chi si occupa più propriamente della parte economica e chi invece più della parte di innovazione. Ho scoperto che l'anno scorso, il 2015, è stato un anno di svolta, se vogliamo, nel food tech, che è questa nuova, se vogliamo, categoria in cui cominciamo a parlare di tecnologia del cibo. Quindi ne parlerei con Kevin. So, we had record last year, you told me minutes ago, about VC fundings. So how do you think the panorama is changed, and how is it going to change again in the next few years?
I think that 2015 is the clear year one of what I name food disruption. It's a year of clear shift in the sense that there has been close to $10 billion that has been raised by food tech projects worldwide to VC funding. I mean private funding. And that figure is huge in itself, $10 billion. And it levels up private funding for food tech projects at the very level of what the traditional food industry is investing into its own research projects. Mm-hmm. So it means that 2015 shows that for the first time, new economy of food has been able to mobilize the same quantity of investment and energy and thinking and technology than the old economy. And you can imagine the change that it will imply in the coming years to the global food economy.
So can we say there's a new economy coming up, and how this new economy is going to relate with the old one?
First, what makes that new economy different to the old one, in the sense that food tech teams and startups do master technologies that the old economy doesn't know about and doesn't know how to master, first. Mm-hmm. Second, those projects are assembling technologies together and managing smart assembling of different technologies to provide breakthrough, innovative answers to frictions or pains that people have on a daily basis. But those answers are much more efficient and closer to what people are expecting for than the old economy. You prefer to be delivered the meal that you want at the price that you want at home at the time you want. It's much easier if it costs the same than going to the supermarket, asking yourself, what will I buy and how will I manage to combine it together? I don't have time to cook. So people like the last mile delivery, for example, do provide technologies to answer frictions that are of a daily frictions with much better efficiency than the old economy. Mm-hmm. And so mastering technologies, assembling them together, and most of food tech projects are small teams, multidisciplinary teams that work very efficiently and quickly and in an agile way to always reinvent themselves to better answer the customer expectation. Then this is the reason why they can go quicker in building stronger products and business proposal. And last point is that from the figures that I know, today 60% of startups have been set up by people coming from the old industry. There are people that have skills, knowledge, and that want to change the world in a way that they couldn't do in their old companies. And this is where it's a true new economy that will build next to the old one. And the challenge for the old one is to learn, not only to cope, but to collaborate with the new economy. Instead of what, they will lose a major opportunity to reinvent themselves.
Okay, so we have speed, we have new knowledge, we have networks. There's a lot of topics we can discuss with all you guys up here. So I want to first talk about a little bit about cooperation. So we have a presentation here. This is yours. About how we can stop wasting food, right? Yeah. Okay, so tra le cose che la tecnologia ci permette di fare è mettere in collegamento chi ha un eccesso di cibo e chi invece ha un maggior bisogno di cibo. Ed è questo l'intervento adesso che sentiremo da parte di Ward, che è fondatore e CEO di Food Cloud, impresa sociale che ha sviluppato una soluzione unica appunto per collegare le imprese che hanno un eccesso di cibo con le comunità locali che invece hanno bisogno di cibo.
So 30% of food produced is lost or wasted across the global food system. And we actually use land the size of China, Kazakhstan and Mongolia combined every year to grow food that's never eaten. We use enough water growing all of these crops to satisfy the world's household water needs. And all of this food is going to waste while 795 million people across the world don't actually have enough to eat. Wasting food is a waste of money, natural resources, and raises serious moral questions when you consider there are people that don't actually have enough food. The UN have said that if we reduce the amount of food wasted by just 25%, we would have enough food to feed all of those that are malnourished. So about 4 years ago, I met my co-founder and we bonded over a passion for food, but we also wanted to find a sustainable solution to solve the considerable problems of food waste and food poverty. And we wanted to do this in an efficient and effective way using technology. Surplus food redistribution has been put forward as one of the best win-win solutions to solve food waste. But doing this at a very local level between a retailer and local charities has proven to be quite difficult, even though the products that are being wasted are still very valuable to the charity sector, including fresh fruit and vegetables and bakery products. So we started off with a very low-tech solution. We rang farmers markets and charities, and we connected them through developing these relationships. But we wanted to find a way to scale this. So we turned to technology, and we realized that we could overcome a lot of the traditional barriers that were faced by using technology. For example, in a supermarket, they want to follow the same process every day, whereas it might be difficult for a charity to commit to that. It can also be very resource intensive for charities to go and collect the food every day, especially sometimes if they arrive and there might not be that much food available. So our platform overcomes a lot of these problems. We were fortunate that the first retailer that came on board was one of the largest globally, with Tesco. So we began developing our solution in partnership with Tesco. So a very basic overview of how it works. You've got a store manager, and then there's a local charity that's literally a few minutes around the corner. In the store, they can upload details of the food that's available, and then an SMS goes out to a local charity. The charity then collects the food. So essentially, we're just connecting a retailer with a local charity so that they can donate food, but also develop a meaningful relationship in the local community. We started off by developing and testing the solution with Tesco and then brought Aldi on board. And this is one of the reasons that we think we've developed a solution that is different to a lot of solutions that exist already. We've had a relentless focus on understanding the challenges that are faced by retailers, from head office to store managers to employees, and then also for the charities and how their volunteers and their logistical challenges that they might face. We have an amazing, passionate team who work to address any support problems. If any unexpected logistical issues arrive, that we can resolve them as quickly as possible. And then, of course, we have our world-class platform. This platform has problem-spotting algorithms that allow us to address any issues that might arrive. They match any events that are happening against charity timetables, charity assignments, and then any issue is automatically pops up, and we try and address it as quickly as possible. It uses accurate location, time, and product information so that we can quickly and effectively redistribute perishable, short-dated products to local charities. And our aim, of course, is to maximise the collection rates that the stores experience. We also have developed it so that any food business can donate, whether they want to use a mobile application in store, whether they send us an Excel spreadsheet, whether they link it up to the PDA scanners that already exist in stores. And this allows us to fulfill 4 retraceability requirements. So where a retailer sells to a customer, they've never had to trace forward because the customer is the end customer. Whereas if a retailer is donating to a charity, they need to have a record of all of the food that the charity receives and the charity that's received it in case of maybe a product recall. And then for the charities, we've kept it as simple as possible. We have found that not all charities will have access to smartphones or to 3G and internet. So we've kept it very simple with an SMS. So no matter how the information gets inputted to our system from the retailer, the charity will always receive a simple SMS, which they just have to text back to confirm whether they're going to collect the donation or not. We also have the opportunity for the retailer to shout about what they're doing through social media, and it's also great for employee engagement. We help retailers reduce their waste disposal costs, and we've also found that for every euro that we charge a retailer, they're actually passing on a savings of up to €6 to their local charity partners. But the impact that we've seen from the charities that we work with has been amazing. They not only experience a reduction in their food bills, but it can also enhance their current services. For example, some employment or charities that we work with, where they help people develop CV skills, interview skills. But if you send somebody out to look for a job and they haven't eaten that day, how likely are they going to succeed in getting that job? Similarly, a women's refuge we work with, a lot of these women would have faced traumatic experiences. They'd struggle to come out of their rooms and socialise and converse with other people that are in the accommodation. Whereas now they found that when the food arrives, they come down, swap and share food recipes, and they hear laughter in the room. They start friendships. Food is a lot more than nutrition and sustenance. It can also act as a tool that really brings people together and communities together. So Food Cloud is a not-for-profit social enterprise. We charge retailers for the service we provide, and there's no charge to our charity partners. But this means that any additional revenue we have, we can reinvest in our service and our platform. In our first 2 years, we took on 150 retail partners, but thanks to the constantly being able to improve our service, in the last 4 months, an additional 200 retailers have come on board, and by next week, there'll be another 300. So we're constantly trying to improve our platform so that we can scale and provide a much more efficient and effective service. So to date, over 2.5 million meals have been redistributed to our over 730 charity partners. But we also have a focus on working with charities that already redistribute surplus food. One of our partners in the UK is a traditional food bank, and they already supply food to over 2,000 charities across the UK. This means that we can ensure that we're providing the best service to the charities that we work with. And by the end of next year, in partnership with Fairshare and Tesco, we're hoping to be in 3,000 stores across the UK. So we've received quite a lot of recognition for what we've done over the last 2 years. But really, I suppose, we're expecting over 9 billion people to be on the planet by 2050. And that's a huge challenge. But with the recent innovations in technology, we have a huge opportunity to use these new innovations to really try and have a much more equitable and less wasteful food system. We can address this challenge in an equitable and sustainable way using technology. And I really hope that more organisations will use technology to drive a positive change in our food system. We have a stand as well, so I'd really invite anyone to come along if they have any questions for us. And I hope that was a good introduction.
Thanks.
You.
So there's something... There's something that caught my eyes in the word cloud you showed us. The biggest word inside there was technology.
Yeah.
So we're talking about food, and yet the biggest word is technology. So this drives me to Marius Robles, who's the co-founder and CEO of Reimagine Food. As you can imagine, yes. Reimagine Food is something that deals with thinking again about everything about food, right? Yes. Not the food itself, but appliances and yes. the industry itself. So bring us 10 years ahead, how yes. the food is going to change with technology.
Yes, let me explain about, we bought 2 years ago, and in these 2 years, we analyzed more than 4,000 food startups around the world. We work together with more than 25 food industry, big companies in food industry. And last week in Alimentaria, one of the second most important in Europe expo about food, we introduced this graphic. Well, this is the picture for us about basically 2 big concepts in the next 5 years. One is what we eat in the future, what kind of products, when we talk about smart foods, what really mean, when we talk about superfoods, etc. Because now we are in a moment when I prepare this session. In the last 2 years, probably I make more than 40 conferences around the world talking about the future of food. Basically, with more than 17, 18 slides about the different concepts, the different startups, the different innovation of the industry. I think that we need to start to talk about another perspective. This is a sample perspective that probably you start to talk in the next month about, like I say, food substitutes. We all of us know that Soylent is probably one of the beverage of meal of fashion in Silicon Valley. New ingredients. We all talk about new proteins, etc. And we talk about high technology like drones, like robots, in the restaurants, in food delivery, the tech restaurant, the different cooks in a robotic kitchen. But this is the first time that I try to explain how we imagine the future of food in just 3 slides. This is the first slide that you can see in our Twitter account, etc. And the second more important slide is a video that now we have all the technology around us. We have the more cheaper technology that we never have, but we have a real problem. All people talk about this problem, but the problem now is a real problem. Enter video, please.
So maybe you can describe the video.
Yes. No, the video is the life of strawberry.
Yeah.
You know? And probably all of you know what is the end of the strawberry. Probably
The toilet?
the
Or
toilet.
way before?
And probably the 65% have missed, died. This is a real problem that all of us talk about food waste. All the people, more than 25,000 people in the next 4 days talk about food waste. But the problem is now. And the problem, we continue with the same problem. That's the last edition of Fish and Chips. We don't increase how the old technology that we have around of us can change this real problem. For this, and I don't know if it's possible to re-enter the video, or we go to the end of. Well, it's not my picture. Oh, okay. But we have now in Reimagine Food some 12 concepts for the near future. And we invite all of you to make, co-innovate, and how we can change or we can increase these concepts in a really, really interesting solution. The first of all is very aggressive. It's recipes. When we talk about recipes now, we have new combination for artificial intelligence, new concept about the recipes. Probably in the next 5 years, the robots are really here. At the moment, it's not here. It's like paper secretary is in this. Probably in the next 2 years, we start to work not about smart cities. We start to talk about smart nutrition cities. We have the technology to detect all the technology around one city. But imagine the possibility when you have the possibility to understand with big data what is the nutrition of every corner around you. What is the real problem about desnutrition in every corner around you. We need combinate, it's very important in the food market, the passion about the food, the tradition. Italy is a very sample about the tradition, about food, and probably is where we have more problems to introduce technology. But technology is very important that makes sense to the food, not in a parallel of the food. All of the startups, probably of these 4,000 startups, I'll try to have the same solution for one specific market, like is food. And probably we are the possibility to have the same mistakes than the other sectors. The technology in food is very important if you have more increased consumer experience, you reduce the food waste, you have a new moments of consumption of the food. If you don't have these objectives, it's not necessary, the technology, I think so. It's probably the first time all of us talking about Uber, the realization about the nutrition, not about the food. Obviously, we have Uber and other companies that start to deliver the food in different methods. But let me democratize the nutrition around the world. We think that probably we have 100 of very big, important challenges for the humanity, for the food industry. Thinking about now, Kevin told about the 20 most important brands, food brands. They lose the 4% of the market quote in the last 2 years. The 4% of $5 trillion. And the food industry continues, is our customer. Don't think it about the power of the open innovation with entrepreneurs, with young entrepreneurs, with the power of open innovation with the startups. And they need to start to really introduce, like company General Mills, Campbell Soup, etc., that they start to introduce the new thinkers about the. This is and obviously at the end the farmer, new concepts about ag precision, the new revolution that we have around the corner, the possibility to the farmer with his smartphones really start to work and have another levels of productivity. And this is some of challenge that I repeat about. We invite all of you, all of these food movement that we have in here to try to challenge in the next edition of Seeds and Tips.
Okay. There's something, again, I try to focus just on one thing when you're talking to go to the other speaker. There's something you've been talking about with this tradition. So even though with all this technology, we still need tradition. And so last year we celebrated here the Expo, and it was everything about tradition, everything about the future of food. So it's a pleasure to have here Douglas Hickey, which is the General Commissioner of the USA Pavilion at Expo Milan of last year. So Douglas, do you want to start with how the industry has changed a year after Expo? So how was the last year?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, and quite frankly, it's inspiring to hear you all speak of what's happening and how you're doing it. I was an entrepreneur. I was a venture capitalist. I started 3 companies, and I applaud any entrepreneur that has the courage and the craziness to go start a company, because it's the hardest thing you can do, but it's the most impactful thing you can do as well. So I've seen it, I've done it, and I see the appreciation for it. The thing that's changed, I think, in the last year or the last couple of years is people recognize food in a different way, and they recognize water in a different way. And they're starting to understand that the element of food and water, there's a tremendous amount of technology associated with it. And I was talking on a panel earlier, and people were saying they're scared of technology around food. Yeah. But we need to think back just a little bit and think about innovation in food has been going on for years and years and years. So as an example, if you look at the drip irrigation system that was developed by the Israelis, that was developed years ago. That's a piece of technology, a piece of key technology that was developed that really spoke to the idea of saving water. I mean, think about it. If you go to Israel today and you see literally a desert with amazing productivity of food taking place because of innovation in technology. If you travel in Italy and you see what's happening in Italy around how food is produced, an amazing amount of technology is taking place associated with food. The difference, though, I think what's happening today is now it's really starting to sort of integrate with the whole supply chain. So food, of how it comes out of the field to how it ends up on the table, there's elements of key technologies that are being implemented through that whole process, which I think is absolutely key. What that says to me is there's great opportunity for entrepreneurs to build great companies. There's great opportunity for venture capitalists and financing sources to participate in probably the biggest market of our lifetime. Because everybody touches food, everybody consumes food. There is not another product in the world that everybody touches or consumes or benefits from. But the challenge, I think, is someone said earlier about the number of people that have ready access to food. So about 800 million people every night around the world go to sleep either malnourished or undernourished. And those are typically women and children. The vast predominance of people that affects. So how do we get this food that we enjoy brilliantly in Italy, how do we make sure that people all around the world get that same kind of benefit of nutrition, of hydration, of all the human rights that everyone should have, not just us sitting here? So I think that the change has been, people are recognizing that we have a social responsibility to help our neighbors around the world. And entrepreneurs, I think, for the first time, are recognizing you can do good and still build great companies. They don't have to be mutually exclusive. What you're doing, with your company is a prime example. So that's what I think is starting to change. Entrepreneurs are really getting to be much more socially conscious of what they're doing, how they're doing it, and the benefit it can have not only to their company, to their investors, but to their community. They don't have to be mutually exclusive. I think that's what's fundamentally changed. And I think Expo, quite frankly, was one of those mechanisms by which people heard that discussion taking place for the first time amongst 140 countries that typically don't agree upon anything, but did agree that we have a problem of how do we feed 9 billion people by 2050 in a sustainable way. And the notion that technology is not going to play a key role in that whole perspective is just naive. And it has to, and we want it to. So someone said to me this morning, I don't want technology in the food chain, in the supply chain. And what they were really saying was they don't want Monsanto in the supply chain. But what about distribution? What about new seed technologies? What about bioengineering? What about preservation of food? What about less food waste? Of course I want that. I just don't want the bad things of technology. Well, I think we all agree we don't want the bad things of technology. But we have to really think about technology, entrepreneurship, and innovation as a mechanism by which we can advance, and we can advance much quicker, how we solve the problem of feeding the planet. So that's sort of what I've seen in the last year or so.
Okay. So everybody has been talking a lot about technology, but there is another aspect of the industry that is changing a lot, which is money. So is there, how is changing the panorama of, accelerators, of startups? So what's the role of startups, and what's the environment of the startups you see in Italy at the moment?
Well, so what's the role? This will not be solved without startups. Just plain and simple. Because typically innovation takes place with smaller companies versus larger companies. Mm-hmm. And it's nothing against larger companies. It's just that smaller companies, innovative companies, entrepreneurs by nature can move at a much quicker rate than larger companies. And because of bureaucracy, because of process, because of just the way people think. But you need both. There's some amazing large companies doing amazing work around the globe. I mean, think about what GE's doing on, taking salt water, making it clean water or pure water in the Middle East. It's amazing what they're doing, that technology. But then think about, little companies talking about how you structure, how you reduce food waste, which is a huge, huge problem around the globe. I think that kind of innovation is going to take place mostly with smaller companies and integrate into larger companies over time. So where is this going to take place? I think with smaller companies. The challenge is now, how do you get smaller companies funded? So, but that whole, in the last couple of years, has changed, that whole view of funding. So when I was managing partner of a venture firm, we never looked at food deals, because I looked at food deals as consumer deals. I didn't really, now I look at food deals as data. Like, how do I make sure that strawberry you were showing in your video comes from the field to the table and it's the same strawberry, if you will? How do I make sure, just like we do with drugs, how do I make sure the efficacy of that product I grew in the field is the same when it gets to the table? Data is going to play a huge role in all of those things. How do I make sure water distribution and water distribution rights are met? Those are same things as copyright and patent kinds of issues. So there's a whole series of things that are going to take place. So what's happening, and there's a picture on one of these slides, when we did the accelerator, venture capitalists are starting to recognize, this is a huge opportunity. That the food ecosystem and the water ecosystem are not only vital to security, safety, and peacefulness around the world, but there's an opportunity to make a lot of money. I mean, that's amazing when those things come together. That doesn't happen too often. So now you're actually seeing funds that are being set up, some of which have been in the United States now, where funds are being set up around food tech. That's the first time that's ever happened. Now, are they as big as some of the other funds? Absolutely not. But it's like when you think about in 1989, the first software fund was set up in the United States. First one. There was never a software fund before that. Well, now it's commonplace. So I look at it as what's happened in 1989 with a guy named John Hummer when he set up the first software fund. The same thing is going to happen in food and food technology now. And I think it's going to happen here because one thing, a number of things Italy does real well, but one of which is food. So I think you're going to see innovation take place here. Now we need to build infrastructure investment behind it so that these great ideas on companies are funded the right way, fostered the right way, given the kind of fuel that they need to get in order to grow into big and substantial companies. So I think we're going to see that, but it's going to take a while.
Okay, cool. So talking about from the field to the table, there's a whole new word, which is distribution. So we have to redefine the distribution. So I want to talk with Vincenzo Martinese, who's an associate partner with the KPMG Advisory. How can we change the distribution? How can we redistribute somehow the power that small companies have instead of big companies, big distributors? And how can we change the way the money is split between all the subjects from the field to the table?
Noi crediamo fermamente nel fatto che oggi sia opportuno ripensare tutta la value chain del mondo del food, perché noi oggi lavoriamo prevalentemente con delle grandi aziende. Non si sente? Me lo attivate? Ok,
Sì.
riparto. Sostanzialmente noi abbiamo capito che oggi c'è una grandissima opportunità. Questa opportunità nel mondo del food passa attraverso il ripensare tutta la value chain, quindi vuol dire partire dal piccolo produttore agricolo fino a chi poi riceve questi prodotti, quindi il consumatore. Perché è importante per noi ripensarla? Perché oggi in molti paesi, in Italia in particolare, ci troviamo in una situazione per la quale alcuni produttori agricoli, anche molto piccoli oggi, sono completamente fuori dal mercato, perché i prezzi che riescono a ottenere dai propri grossisti sono completamente antieconomici, per cui spesso abbandonano le culture creando spreco. A volte si trovano in condizioni da dover chiudere le proprie aziende, e questo non perché non ci sia un mercato, ma perché non hanno capacità di accesso a questo mercato. E il concetto è che oggi la catena del valore è molto spostata verso il lato del consumatore, chi guadagna di più e chi è più vicino al consumatore. Dobbiamo cercare di riportare questa catena del valore in maniera un po' più bilanciata verso chi produce. Per fare di nuovo degli esempi, oggi ci sono consumatori che su siti online comprano prodotti che magari sono effettivamente delle eccellenze, prodotte dall'altra parte del capo del paese che gli vengono spedite in un giorno, e ci sono invece produttori magari dietro casa che abbandonano a terra quantità di prodotto elevatissime perché non sanno come consegnarlo e non ritengono economico produrlo e portarlo fino al consumatore. Noi dobbiamo cercare attraverso la tecnologia di cambiare questo paradigma, cioè di creare un modo di sviluppare delle comunità, delle piattaforme che valorizzino quello che noi abbiamo e che in altri concetti si chiama mercato contadino, si chiama chilometro zero. Vuol dire utilizzare la tecnologia per creare delle reti locali che permettano a quelli che oggi producono della qualità che non viene valorizzata dal mercato di accedere al consumatore finale, perché questo non è solo sviluppo per il produttore, è sviluppo per la comunità, crea territorio, crea rete, sviluppa energie che oggi i produttori agricoli non hanno perché di nuovo non hanno accesso a queste cose. Sviluppa programmazione. Noi molto spesso lavoriamo con dei grandi clienti per sincronizzare la supply chain con quello che ci chiedono i consumatori, con la domanda, con il mercato. Oggi il mondo dell'agricoltura spesso questa programmazione, questa sincronia non esiste. I produttori decidono di produrre qualcosa senza sapere se quel qualcosa è effettivamente in termini di volumi richiesto e comparabile alla domanda, e questo di nuovo crea sprechi. Dobbiamo trovare un modo, attraverso le nuove tecnologie, di creare portali come quelli che abbiamo visto nel mondo di Food Cloud, che permettano al produttore dietro l'angolo di vendere direttamente al proprio consumatore, di trasmettere un messaggio di marketing che oggi non è accessibile a loro, di nuovo in parte per indisponibilità di risorse, in parte per mancanza di cultura, e che invece è accessibile a prodotti magari industriali che non hanno quelle caratteristiche di qualità che noi invece vogliamo tutelare. E in questo il Made in Italy è il numero uno, in questo gli italiani si reinventano in qualunque tipologia di forma per riuscire a trovare il modo di creare valore. Quindi noi crediamo che questo debba essere il futuro, ripensare la value chain, ribilanciare questi aspetti e creare beneficio per la comunità avvicinando i produttori ai consumatori. Perché oggi la catena è troppo lunga, i passaggi sono enormi e, come dicevamo prima, l'esempio delle fragole è perfetto. Cioè noi non sappiamo quello che poi ci arriva sulla tavola e non riusciamo neanche a vivere l'esperienza di quel prodotto. Immaginiamo un attimo di avere a disponibilità una piattaforma tecnologica per cui, come oggi facciamo con la tecnologia, possiamo comprare qualcosa e farcela spedire a casa, o ritirarla al mercatino contadino più vicino, o andarla a recuperare in un negozio. Oggi tutto questo funziona, ma funziona con il business tradizionale, con i prodotti alimentari tradizionali. Domani noi dobbiamo rendere questa tecnologia, questo modello di business accessibile anche ai piccoli produttori, a quelli che oggi non hanno di nuovo le capacità per prestarsi sul mercato. Questa è l'essenza del new internet come food, è il fatto che dobbiamo rendere più facilmente accessibili certi mezzi che oggi non lo sono e dobbiamo creare dei network che sviluppino cultura e che innescano dei meccanismi, perché oggi è facile leggere su un sito internet l'eccellenza di un prodotto, è molto più difficile capire se quell'eccellenza nasce da un messaggio di marketing o nasce dalla volontà di persone che in realtà quei prodotti li hanno fatti crescere, hanno investito tempo. Ultimo concetto che volevo spendere è che oggi si parla tanto di customer experience. In realtà quale migliore customer experience di poter scegliere se andarsi a cogliere un certo prodotto nel campo del proprio contadino? Quale migliore esperienza di poter andare a vivere con la propria famiglia un momento in cui non è solo comprare, ma è anche vivere la comunità? Questi concetti devono diventare il motore per l'innovazione e per lo sviluppo delle comunità locali, perché questo è il futuro, secondo noi, del cibo del vero 2050.
Ed eccoci allora al grande tema di questo panel, che è l'Internet of Food. Food is the new internet. So when we are reimagining the role of internet in the distribution and everything, we need new protocols, we need new rules, we need maybe also infrastructures. So we have Johan Jorgensen, who's the president of the Internet Society. I believe you have also a presentation for us. So we can talk about how the web can enable access and change the distribution chain, right?
Okay, so first of all, I agree with all the previous speakers. Thank you very much. And I'm not the president of the Internet Society. I wish I was, but I probably need to do a lot more work before gaining such an important title. But what I am, I'm heading up something called the Internet Society Special Interest Group for Internet of Food, which is a very, very long way of saying that the Internet Society has recognized, and the Internet Society, by the way, is the global discussion forum for the new standards that governs the backbone of the Internet that you use every day. It's a way of, as I said, recognizing that food is one of the items that we really need to do something about. And the question here to me, when we're discussing issues like food and tech, and of course preaching to the crowd here, where you're all converted believers in the fact that food and tech will merge, is how do you go about and talk about this? Because I think what we do is we underestimate the magnitude of change that's going to sweep the world of food in the next coming decades. It's going to be fundamental change that will, flip value chains, move trillions of dollars, and change the fate of nations, which might seem a little bit bombastic, but I think this is true. And we need to realize what's going to happen. How do I do this? And I think I made a fun experience last year. I ran the innovation program for the American Pavilion at the Expo, and I think you've seen this picture before in Dog's presentation. It's so beautiful, you can look at it the whole day. And I can say if everything was like the USA Pavilion was at the Expo, was open, inclusive, innovative, healthy, green, then everything would be fine. But the problem is that the world of food is not the spaceship that is the USA Pavilion, or was the USA Pavilion. This is the night sky seen from above. It's, of course, if you can recognize this, this is a picture of, light on planet Earth from above, and what you don't see is, of course, North Korea. There's a small light to the left of the encircled country. That's Pyongyang. And to me, this is the amount of light that food emits in the world of tech currently. Absolutely nothing. Zilch. We do have some tech in various production facilities and other places, but nowhere near the amount of technology we have in other areas. But will it remain like that? No. So what you see here is a picture of rice, grains of rice with names on them. And this is pretty much the what we're doing at the Internet Society for Internet of Food. And that's a gathering of very smart individuals, excluding myself, of course, but people like Matthew here, one of the founders of that, where the ambition is to find a way of putting an identifier on every piece of rice, every grain of rice, potential at least, do it in a totally open way, at zero cost, and by doing that, then of course pushing it into the internet infrastructure. If what we're currently discussing is the right way to go about, let me not get into the details, I don't know, but I can easily predict that we're 10 years from now, we'll have an essential component in the internet backbone taking care of the digital aspects of food. Will that change stuff? You bet it will change stuff. A whole lot of things will change. I mean, just go back a couple of decades and try to understand what was it like before the internet hit us as individuals, be it for communication or for social. It has happened a lot of things since then. And food is about to hit the same type of leap. So, a tomato in the future, without any information, that will be nothing but a commodity. We will need to know what's in that tomato, what's around the tomato, the journey it has made before it reached our plate, if it's wasted eventually even. Today we don't know that because we don't have any data around food, but we will have data around food. And it's not going to be about the data you see on this picture, it's going to be gigabytes of data around this tomato in the future. We also want to have transparency. This is a little detour, but I don't know if you're aware, but ethical shopping is one of the biggest major trends on the planet right now when it comes to retail. And ethical shopping is virtually impossible without us knowing stuff, without us having data. So that's another mega trend, actually craving this data. And blood. Talk about flipping the value chain. How come we're eating what's being pushed to us instead of eating what we really need? And I think, if I know you correctly, Matthew, we'll get in a little on this in your section. Essentially, if you can take a sample of your blood and understand if I need to have more meat or less meat or have more nutrients of a certain sort, of course that will affect my eating behavior. And to me, this is far more important than tradition. We talk a lot about tradition and our great traditions, especially here in Italy, you have great food traditions. I come from a country up north in Europe, Sweden. We don't have great food traditions. So we cannot rely on tradition giving us good food. We must rely on science. So this is a type of leap that countries like mine will take. And what will that lead to? This is Captain Obvious. For those of you who don't know him, he's the head figure of Hotels.com. Hotels.com did a little nice thing. They wrapped a search interface around the world's hotels and effectively stole away 30% of the values of the bookings. You know, that's a kind of nice little wrapping you can do if you have data, right? So if you have data, you suddenly have new layers of technology and new layers of services. Back to the world of food. This is, to me, still the world of food. It's an old industrial system where you bang, as in the case of a Model T, pieces of metal into a product that then rolls off the conveyor belt and goes into society and then remains in society for a while. If you take a look at the Tesla today, a Tesla is, of course, not a product. It's a platform that's constantly updated. It's not an industrial product. It's a post-industrial product. We have added a lot of information and a lot of knowledge to that piece of product. And it's also been something that we start to relate to in society as well, in other ways than just buying it and running it. I'm sure aware that Tesla recently opened their sign-up for their Model 3, or the Tesla Model 3, had 400,000 people sign up by depositing $1,000 each. If I do the maths, that's 400 million US in liquidity going into Elon Musk's account. He can do a lot of stuff with that, but he's not just using that for raising funds, he's also using it for raising relationships, for gaining relationships with his customers. And this is another picture when it comes to food. I mean, Kevin, I think this is basically the same numbers that you brought up before. And why is 6 billion then larger than 10 billion? It's because, of course, 6 billion, which I thought was the food tech investments last year. I'm sure you're better informed. So my prediction was that this year, food tech investments would surpass the R&D investments of the 2,000 largest food companies on the planet. But apparently that has already happened. So this is old numbers. And if you take a look at it today, if you're a normal food company, you invest something like 0.25% of your revenues into R&D. If you're a tech company, what is it, like 25%? It's a factor 100 when it comes to innovation. And this, of course, will also play a big role when it comes to where stuff will happen in terms of innovation. And this is just a picture in order to show to you the pure physical layout, what's happening in the US. We all know what's happening in Silicon Valley, a lot of stuff, right? And we also know that a lot of stuff happens in the Central Valley region. It's the largest food-producing region in the US. I think the annual turnover or value of the production is 54 billion US or so. And of course, you can notice the very close proximity to Silicon Valley. So here we have a Silicon Valley that's full of savvy business developers, investors with very deep pockets, interested users in the Central Valley region. And, if this isn't, these two valleys aren't going to merge, I'll eat a hat. I'll eat a complete factory full of hats. And I think this is what the rest of the world is up to right now, up against. Because you cannot feed the entire world from the Central Valley region in California. But you can feed the entire world with digital layers and data solutions around food from Silicon Valley. And I think this is something that every food-producing nation needs to take into account. Where are you going to be in the value chain? Are you going to be a producer of commodities, tomatoes without information? Or will you add information to your products? Will you try to get higher up in the value chain? Or will you just be ran over by some of the savvy people out there in the tech world suddenly throwing themselves all over the world of food? It's an existential question, hence the notion, the fate of nations. And I think this is a question everyone needs to take into account. And the fact is that this is it's a total new ball game. This is a picture of cricket, and no one understands cricket, right? And no one really understands the way where food is heading as well either. And I think, to us, I think it's about trying to understand and embrace all the changes that we see, trying to be smart about that, and trying to be prepared about things suddenly hitting us from behind or from the left. Because unless we do that, digital, this is the first and last thing a food company will see of digital. Someone that comes to get you. And my hope is that this guy will not come and get you. And if you are prepared and take into consideration what data can do to things, chances are you will not meet this fellow until later in your lives and not early in your lives. So I think that was all for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So the key word that caught my ear this time is healthy food. So we've been talking about the health of the industry of food through redistribution of money, and now we're switching to the health of people through the food itself. This is the area where I can introduce the two last speakers, Isabella and Matthew. So Matthew is the Associate Director with the UC Davis Healthy System Initiative for Wireless Health and Wellness, which is a long name for something really interesting, actually. A project to encourage people to live healthy. So what I was thinking is health is kind of an empty value if you don't have culture, if you don't have information about what you're talking about. Is this something that you are working on?
Absolutely. If you don't mind, I'm just going to stand up.
Of course.
Yeah. My voice is about 3 octaves lower when I stand. I just feel more comfortable. I can breathe. It's interesting that you ask about culture. And before I came here, I was with the Food Innovation Institute in Bologna. And they took me on, it was their retreat. And as a leader there. And we went on a trip to Spilumberto, which is the home of traditional balsamic vinegar. And while there, I learned so much about balsamic vinegar, I had no idea. And the traditional balsamic vinegar doesn't look anything like the balsamic vinegar sitting next to my stove at home. And it made me realize that there's a difference in culture with how the food is made and with what we call it. Actually, even looking at this pizza here, this looks like a traditional pizza, but the pizza that I was eating in Bologna, I thought looked more like a focaccia. And I said that to somebody from Bologna, and they said, "No, it's pizza." And so for me, sometimes we use the same word, right? So we have these issues of semantics. Mm-hmm. And then more specifically around culture as well, I learned the phrase while I was down there, sobremesa. And I think most Italians are familiar with the idea of sobremesa, which is the time you take after you eat a meal together with friends and family, and you sort of push the dishes aside, and you maybe pull out the sambuco or the grappa, and you sit and you talk, and you have a moment. Mm-hmm. And so I have a student who's working on building ontologies, and I'll talk about what ontologies are in a minute, but vocabularies around eating and what it means to be eating, and around the social microclimates that are associated with eating. And these are often culturally specific. So with that, I'm just going to head into the presentation that I had prepared to really talk to you about food systems, food and eating, and health. And all of these information systems, we can't decouple one from the other. We can't talk about healthy eating without talk about sustainability, right? We can't talk about healthy eating without talking about culture. We can't separate these things, and it would be misguided if we tried to do that. So if we're building these systems in concert, then we can actually see that if we develop a common language, much to Doug's point, that we need common standards, then we can start talking about languages that can help us with food security, environmental stability, environmental sustainability, and personalized products, as well as improved wellness and happiness. One of the things you mentioned was that you saw health as something that was, like a disease is a glass half empty. In fact, I often say in many of my presentations that in the United States, we don't have a National Institute of Health. We have a National Institute of Disease Intervention. If you look at the total amount of money that gets spent by the National Institutes of Health, it's actually spent on treating a disease. And that's a little bit ridiculous, and I'll get more into that in just a minute. For those of you who are tweeting, I'll just put my Twitter handle up there. It's @MatteoLan. So one of the things that we want to talk about when we talk about the semantic web of food systems, food and health, is the idea that we have data coming from all over the place. It's already happening. We have sensors everywhere. We have sensors in the water. We have sensors on fields. We can put essentially fancy wireless microphones on the grapevines, and we can listen for how stressed the plant is so that we can dial in exactly the amount of water to give that grape plant so that we can then know what kind of wine we're going to make by measuring the sweetness. We can do all kinds of other things. We have GPS sensors on tractors now. We have sensors on traps to catch insects so that we can monitor insect populations and growths. And of course, we have our phone. And our phone right now, this phone right here, contains more computing power than the computer that sent men to the moon originally. So what I'll talk about in a little bit is not only is this pervasive, but the fact is that we've scaled down the computer, right? We're not all able to communicate with each other because we made one giant supercomputer of the world. We're able to do it because we've scaled down technology, and that'll be another theme that I get to. And these things are producing so much data, right? So we have data in precision agriculture. We've got remote sensing data. We've got soil data, wind data, crop data, water data. And we've got all of these sensors on our phones. What you're looking at underneath there is about 4 seconds worth of data just from an accelerometer and a gyrometer on a phone. So massive amounts of data. So the question is, how can we link this vast amounts of data as they exist along the environment, ag, food, diet, health, knowledge spectrum? As I said before, we can't decouple these things. So this is a picture that you can find if you were to look up W3C semantic web, the definition of the semantic web from the World Wide Web Consortium. And this is an example of what's called a knowledge graph, where we can take conceptual objects and sometimes real objects and link them with each other with linking phrases. So you can see Bob is interested in the Mona Lisa. Mona Lisa was created by Leonardo da Vinci. Well, we can do the same thing with information about food, right? So that's me there, and I happen to like panissa varcellese. I hope I said that right. It's my mother-in-law's risotto, and she's from Vercelli. And so we can start linking people and food, habits, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But the question is, well, how do we prioritize what it is that we want to keep track of? Where do we start? Well, let's start perhaps with the most pressing food problems. So if we look at the Sustainable Food Systems Program from the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, we see that some of the biggest problems are limited understandings between linkages between nutrition and sustainability, food consumption, production, security, lack of available data, methodologies, and standards. So let's make them. So we looked at that problem statement. We said, okay, well, let's start categorizing all of the different types of issues that there could be, sustainability issues. And we culled the literature for all types of sustainability issues, and then we categorized them into social and political issues, physical and financial issues, natural resource issues, and what have you. And some of these issues you'll see in the dark blue were component issues of larger issues, which is the entire spectrum there. So we made a framework, and we said, okay, some of these issues are related to impact, some of these issues are related to having a vulnerability, and we developed a matrix for how these things can link together with indicators for how we can measure various sustainability issues. And then we said, well, gosh, if we're going to get people to care about this, we need to identify the stakeholders. So we went through the process of identifying stakeholders for some of those large conceptual entities about sustainability, and this is where we came out. Food companies care about some issues, but not all issues. Global initiatives care about some issues, but not all issues. And then there's things that concern consumers directly. We also need to realize that these problems are interconnected. So if we just look at a map of all the different kinds of sustainability issues that we came up from literature mining, the sustainability literature, we can see here that the red dots are the sort of meta issues. The blue dots are component issues, and they have linkages to the red issues. And then the green dots, yes, those are dots, are the indicators for how they affect other issues. So it's a highly, highly integrated environment. You adjust one thing here and it's something else over here. So one person's improvement in sustainability here might be worse for somebody else. There's also another mandate. We know that food is the largest single element across the top 10 killers. So if we look at the CDC in the United States, heart disease, stroke, dementia, Alzheimer's, colon cancer, these all have food dimensions. We see the same thing if we look at the World Health Organization. Yet in 2011, our national academies put together a panel, and they said, where is precision medicine headed? And they produced a 120-page tome that said that in order to improve health through precision medicine, we need a new taxonomy of disease. And in order, they said, to improve the drug development process. Does anybody else think that's kind of crazy, right? Food was actually mentioned in this 120-page work 7 times. And you might think, okay, 7, that's not so bad. Well, the only time food was mentioned was actually in the signature of the person who was from the USDA Food and Drug Administration. So food has been totally left out in terms of its value for producing health. That's a little crazy. So when I talk about health, actually, I want to talk about health outside of disease. So our most progressive physicians often talk about preventing diabetes or preventing heart disease. But I would say it's not enough to talk about that. In other words, if we're going to build ontologies that are capable of improving our health, we need to get away from the disease concept. So it's not enough to say, I want to prevent atherosclerosis for my patient, or I want to prevent arteriosclerosis for myself. What we want to say is, how do I improve the relative flexibility and durability of my vasculature? It's a far different scientific question, and I think it's one that we need to start funding. And the way that that's going to happen is going to be through food, and it's going to be through behavior change. So this is an example of a portal we created at UC Davis. This is called the You Seem Healthy portal. And it's a participatory portal. It's built for employee wellness. We can sync to multiple devices. It's an open source technology, so you can take the source code from it and install it yourself. And we're currently doing clinical trials. What you're looking at here on the map is my movement through the environment. I know it's kind of creepy and Orwellian, but the green line represents myself walking. If the blue line, it would be when I was riding a bike, and the gray line is when I'm in my car. Now, that red triangle on the top, I can drag through the timeline, and you'll see the blue triangle with the red around it moving through the environment on that time of day. At the same time, you'll see my activity levels down below moving. So we can record all of my activity, right? So the semantic web of food and health and the internet of food and health is going to be, to Johan's point, orders of magnitude larger than the current internet as it exists. So we're not just tracking food, but we're also tracking activities, and eating is one of those types of activities. That's it. Just happens to be in my slide deck. This is one way we're actually gathering more and more information. I hope you don't mind me putting your... It's in there. It was already in there. I'm not going to belabor the point about TelSpec, because you're going to hear a lot more about that in just a minute. Suffice it to say that we have new ways of acquiring information about food, and for submitting and contributing information about food as well. So what about this business of how do we, in essence, characterize health? Well, one of the things that we came up with is an ontology to describe physical activity, health, and fitness. So you remember those dots, the graph that I just showed you with the relationships. Well, that's an ontology. That is a vocabulary where I've defined not just the words in the vocabulary, not just a hierarchical taxonomy of words, but how they're related to each other. And when we develop these ontologies, we can enable artificial intelligence algorithms to do predictive analytics. We can enable all kinds of information technologies that don't currently exist and can't exist without those kinds of things. So if I was to characterize what impact does my behavior have on my physical activity, I can start characterizing, well, a dose of physical activity and a resulting health metric. So we came up with this vocabulary system where I can essentially label the type of activity that I'm doing, the condition under which I'm doing it, the pattern that I use, how many reps, how fast, how hard, what intensity, and the resulting outcome on my heart or my vasculature or whatever other component of my body that I care about measuring, which is something that's very unique about health as opposed to disease, is that it's very subjective and we all define it differently. And in that regard, it's very similar to, for instance, flavor. Whereas I may describe the flavor of a specific wine one way, someone else may describe it another. So it's going to be important to develop ontologies of flavor as well. So we want to go from what we have now on the internet. Essentially, there are multiple repositories where people are contributing information about food, like Open Food Facts and like the food portal on Wikipedia. And we want to take this information and we want to make unambiguous vocabularies about it so that we can annotate that information. At the same time, we want to enable scientific information. So the hat that I was wearing a minute ago was as the Associate Director for Wireless Health and Wellness for UC Davis Health System, but I also teach food product innovation and food product development for the Food Science Department at UC Davis. And so this is one of the vocabulary systems that we're building. This is a knowledge model and a computable vocabulary about food structure and properties, so that we can start developing data about, very specific data about things like the flexibility of a dough, the thickness of a sauce, down to the microscopic level, right? So you can imagine if I was to try to peel apart all of the various components of a lasagna, it's actually orders of magnitude more complex than the entire drug regimen that my grandmother happens to be on, right? That's a lot of data. A single lasagna. And whose lasagna? It's a subjective thing again, right? This is why we're talking about orders and orders of magnitude more information. So we can then visualize that when these ontologies are built, they will support many very large-scale manufacturing operations and safety innovations. They will also enable new businesses, startup businesses. They'll enable traceability for food tracking. They'll enable sensor technologies. And perhaps even most importantly, pathogen detection, right? Food is nothing if it's not safe. And of course, manufacturing and packaging. Some of what's happening now in the food industry, and it's been alluded to by some of our guests as well, is that, and what I pointed out is this scaling down. So the Nestle's and the Mars and the Krafts and the Nabiscos have been losing market share massively for the last several years. And what's gaining market share are food startups making unique foods. And they are able to, some of them with a desire to be bought by a large food company. So many large food companies now have realized that rather than having an R&D department, it's better just to watch the marketplace and buy up small businesses. And so we're seeing a shift in the way these companies are funded. But just some examples about how we're scaling down and what technology is able to give us. This is a picture from the winery at UC Davis. And each one of those barrels that you see there is actually has about 20 sensors in it that are able to detect several aspects about fermentation in a wine. And that entire array of fermentation vessels can be controlled from my cell phone, or I could control a single individual fermentation tank if I want. Now this is being scaled down even further, and we're starting to see the emergence of technologies for the home where we can do similar type things. This is an example of a product called Pico Brew. I also happen to teach beer and brewing, and I had some of these guys come in and guest lecture for me in my class last quarter. And the Pico Brew machine is really a wonder. You can put in a grain bill. There's 4 elements to brewing beer: your grain, your hops, your yeast, and your water. So you can put in your grain bill and hops and yeast and walk away and let this countertop brewing machine brew your beer. Now, sometimes you'll want to be able to recreate something. And so you'll want a specific yeast. You want specific grains toasted a specific way. You want certain kind of hops. Maybe you're trying to recreate a specific recipe. Well, Pico Brew's done a wonderful thing, and they've actually contracted with some of the microbreweries. So we're actually seeing, in fact, I think that beer is actually leading the way for food startups in the United States. Right now we have over 600 microbreweries in California. And we have more microbreweries now in the United States than we've ever had at any time. Well, Pico Brew's done an amazing thing, and they've contracted with several breweries, and they're offering Pico packs. So the breweries where you might have a specific India Pale Ale that you like to drink, or a specific stout, or whatever it is, you can actually order a Pico pack through the Pico Brew, and they will deliver the grains that they use, the hops that they use, and the yeast that they use, and you can put it in your machine, and you can recreate the beers as you like to enjoy them at the brewery. Nice. So this is the beginning of digitized food, right? And I think it's pretty amazing. So not only are we delivering it direct to the consumer, but we're also, by scaling down, enabling point of delivery processing in the marketplace. So this is a picture from Artis Coffee in Berkeley, California, where you can go and you can pick out beans from anywhere in the world practically. And once you pick them out, you can have them roasted exactly to your specification. And then you can use whatever brewing style that you want to use to drink your coffee. Highly personalized coffee experience happening there. So I can't make all these ontologies myself. It would be simply impossible. One of the things that I'm happy to say is that I've been participating in the International Conference for Biological and Biomedical Ontologies for the last few years, and this is the first year that they have decided to have the theme food, nutrition, health and the environment, and essentially feeding 9 billion. And this conference is happening in August. Following that, we'll be hosting at UC Davis another conference specifically about building these ontologies, bringing together stakeholders, business leaders, technology leaders, government leaders, to talk about what are your vested interests in building these ontologies, what are your priorities, let's build them together. It will be a working meeting where we work together to build these information infrastructures in order to be able to produce many of the things that I was talking about, arising from many of the data sets that you're seeing up here, and linking them together. All right. With that, thanks very much.
Thank you. So, Isabel, thank you for waiting all this time. Sorry for keeping you waiting. There's another key phrase that you told before, which is so much data. So this brings us to talk a little bit about TelSpec, which is the system that Isabel Hoffman is the CEO. And it's, if I'm right, it's a three-element system, right? So there's a sensor, there's an analysis engine, and there's an application, right? So we're still talking about health and how you can push people to live a little bit more healthy, right?
Yes. Yes and no.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Isabel Hoffman. So I actually brought one of the TelSpec sensors here. As you see from the previous photograph that Matthew showed, it's still a bit thick, but works as certified. I can put it on and is right now broadcasting Bluetooth and will connect to my phone, and essentially will give me information about what is in the food. So the inspiration for this project was actually my daughter. She suffered from many food allergies, and she was pre-diabetic, and eating out became a huge problem. So the problem, what is in my food, is actually a two problem. One is a consumer problem, and the other one is a business problem. So the consumer, often the label does not have ingredients of ingredients. You do not see, even on sugars, you do not see what type of sugar the label actually has. And if you, for instance, are diabetic, you probably want to avoid certain types of sugars, such as high fructose corn syrup or fructose itself. Then the other problem is that labels actually will give you only the ingredients that were originally used to produce a certain product. And when we bake things or produce them or manufacture them at high temperatures, there's many other ingredients that come out that are byproducts of that baking, of that process of manufacturing. One of them, for instance, is acrylamide, which is a carcinogen, causes cancer. But there is also the composition of sugars. For instance, white sugar, sucrose, baked, will transform itself into fructose and glucose. So the original label is the ingredients they put in before, not the ingredients that are there after. And that's very important, especially to deal with the obesity problem worldwide, epidemic. Okay? And sometimes labels are simply not available. And the business-to-business aspect is, of course, raw materials are often adulterated, and I will give you an example of a study and a project that we've done of this nature. So I'm going to give you that little story for a bit later on, but we're seeing in the world a lot of adulteration, especially in China and in India, and food fraud is very common now. The meat horse problem is one of them, but it's many. Legislations are requiring more and more out of the food manufacturers to actually test, but testing is expensive. Just to test one bread alone, and we do this regularly in partnership with a company in Madison, Wisconsin, it costs us $900, roughly 800 euros, to test one bread. So as you can see, it's not feasible to do this in large scales. And consumers are demanding transparency, as we talked here quite extensively, and accountability. So what I thought, being a mathematician and in technology, in terms of a solution, would be what you see here. A series of scanners integrated in different areas, and this is one of them, but they could be integrated in your manufacturing, in your connected kitchen. That scanner is connected to a phone via Bluetooth. The phone is actually the one that transmits the information to the cloud. And the phone receives the information from the cloud. In the cloud, the information sent initially is just kilobytes, very small information. So the scanner itself is actually stupid. Okay, it's a spectrometer that reads light, throws light and reads light, sends a series of kilobytes, which are basically the light that traveled back from the sample. At what velocity did it travel? So the light goes out from the window here on this spectrometer in a consistent manner at a certain regular wavelength. When it hits the sample, the molecule, the food, it reflects back that light. And that reflection and the velocity of those photons creates a unique fingerprint of the food. And that unique fingerprint of the food is then sent to the cloud. And in the cloud, we have big data, huge amounts of data. In fact, we decompose that information into many different questions, such as, does it have fat? Does it have what type of fat and how much does it have? Does it have gluten? Does it have protein? Does it have carbohydrates? And how do we do this? We do this with machine learning and bioinformatic techniques. Okay? So our IP actually resides in the cloud, in the actual algorithms that we use, not in the scanner. So often people come to us and say, oh, but you know, the scanner is, and you didn't secure your intellectual property with a scanner. No, go ahead, all of China, copy it. Be my guest. We don't care. In fact, we don't care if someone else sells it, because that's not our business. Our business is data business. So this is what TelSpec actually does. We are an end-to-end solution for food testing, food safety, and food authenticity. So yes, we are a little bit schizophrenic because we are catering to the consumer at the same time as to the business, mostly because the business that we cater to actually are feeding information to our algorithms. Data, we are receiving data from large business agricultural companies that are coming to us with problems of fraud or problems of adulteration, and that data is food data that we then use to turn around and improve our algorithms, okay? So we have actually a stand here, so you'll be able to see a demonstration of the TelSpec in action. Today we have about 10 detections that we do very well, which are carbohydrates, proteins, fats, sugars, fiber, glycemic index, insulinogenic load, presence, how much sugars, and the presence of absence of gluten. We're building other modules, and as well as food fraud. So here is an example of a test work project that we did for a large agricultural company, a supplier of agricultural ingredients. They had a problem. They sell gluten, wheat gluten, to many bakeries all over the world. And that wheat gluten comes from China, and it's often adulterated. And they were aware of this problem, and they created a lab in China, in Shanghai. And over the years, they realized that when they retested the samples that the lab in Shanghai tested in their own facility in Europe, they found that the results were not identical. Shanghai lab was saying it's not adulterated, and the European lab was saying it is adulterated. So they came to us to deal with this problem. And the idea was, give us something that is portable, and we can, before we even buy the wheat gluten, we'll test it, and we will buy it or not, pending if it is adulterated. So the first question we had to ask them was, how is it adulterated? Because not being in a food business and being in technology, we had to understand, were we looking at it? My group, by the way, is a large group, involves food scientists and chemists and machine learning people and bioinformatic people, so all of us had to understand this. And was shocking. And I think most of you are going to be shocked now by what I say there. You see there, poultry meal, the first item. That is a name that is given to what it's called also feta protein. Does anyone know what feta protein is here? No? Okay, essentially, it is protein derived from human hair or hair from chicken and grinded, bleached, extracted proteins, and mixed with the flour. That hair is, by the way, collected from barbershops all over China. Okay? So that was the first one. And so how is it, why are they adulterating? Because it's cheaper than actually with gluten. It's cheaper. So greed actually brought this up, okay? So as you see, quite a bit of poultry meal. And then all sorts of adulteration, such as urea, and so on. So this is a small study, and the client that we did this study for was very pleased, and we're now moving to the next phase, which basically almost every single product that they're going to be selling we're going to use our own algorithms. Now, how long did this take us to produce? We got many samples from them, so we were very lucky because the biggest problem we have is actually the samples. We tested we scanned for about 4 months, and then we built our algos for another 2 months and retested for a month. So we now, with the other flowers, can go much faster because this was just a team of 3 people, okay? So this is where we are in terms of TelSpec. We have built detections of carbohydrates, fats, proteins, as I was mentioning before. We are actually working on dairy and soya, as well as peanuts, eggs, and seafood. We actually have models for dairy and soya. We do not yet have models for peanuts, eggs, and seafood. We're building them. And for food adulteration, we intend to add quite a few elements besides the ones that you just saw a few seconds ago. We intend to do things such as bisphenol A. We intend to also look at 1 or 2 pesticides most commonly used, and as well as some byproducts like acrylamide. Are we going to be able to attain that type of detection? We still don't know. We're constantly pushing this little machine to the last digit, literally. It's possible that we'll have a second iteration of this, but maybe not, hopefully not. What we did that is very unique, and I'm actually really proud of this thing, is that most spectroscopy companies are doing spectroscopy in a very closed laboratory environment. Now, our first biggest problem was, this is for users. These are for people that are not in a lab. They are in a restaurant. And so we are outsourcing the data by asking the users to scan for us. And they scan for us through an app. What you see there is one section of our app that allows the user to scan, see actually the spectrum. You see the spectrum there, the little picture of the number of photons and the energy of the photons, and actually allows the user to say, okay, I'm going to submit this amount of scans I've done for this food to the TelSpec database. Okay? Our database today is close to 1 million scans, which sounds huge, but it's nothing, as you heard, from big data. Absolutely a tiny minuscule of what we need. Okay? But the fact that we are doing crowdsourcing of the scans is a huge innovation, because no one is doing this out there with a lab on the hands. So what we see is our technology not really being this. This is just a thing that we had to deliver to tell people that we actually exist and we are real, because there's a lot of discredit people, especially in Silicon Valley. One particular blogger likes to blush us. But what we really are doing is integrating our technology in many other devices, such as the connected kitchen. We have started working with a group that manufactures appliances to connect, as you see there, the little green things are connecting the spectrometer where you can scan the food, either on a cooktop or on a scale, inside a blender, outside of a fridge, and so on. And so I like this picture because basically we're building what we call the world's food print. Okay, so ability to actually collect food from where people are scanning them, that food, which will be invaluable for epidemiological studies and public health studies. Understanding why people live longer. Do they eat something that we did not, a certain ingredient? I mean, I know that some studies have been done on this, and there was no conclusion except for caloric restriction, but maybe there is an ingredient, a specific spice that these people are using to live longer, the centenarians, which are 4 spots in the world. People that have prevalence of gastric cancer. We know gastric cancer is prevalent in Japan. What exactly is the cause? We assume it's likely the pickled ginger, but is this really the case? Can we associate the horrible next epidemic of neurological diseases to pesticides? Can we finally start building that correlation? So there's a lot of data available there that is going to be helping the world live better and do better studies. There's also a lot of data for the food industry. Hopefully the food industry will improve what they deliver. They can track, they monitor new foods, monitor quality, track the growth specifically of needs of people. So there's a lot of information also that this data is going to be able to give the governments and food industry, as well as civil society. The civil society, human beings like us, are going to be able to start monitoring actually the food manufacturers' stance on health. When they say we don't use this much trans fats and we don't use this much sugars, is this true? Okay. So very quickly, I welcome anyone to partner that is interested to partner with Telspec. This is a beta product. This is not a final product. We are an Arizona-based company with small little locations in Europe, Canada, and Taiwan. Actually, my marketing director for Taiwan is actually here. I don't know if she's in the crowd or not. Zhao, are you here? No, she's probably outside. Oh, she is there. There we go. That's Zhao from Taiwan. So we, as I said, we have a patent, and we are really trying out there to get new partnerships, involve food manufacturers, involve scientists, involve people that are interested in creating a better world, so that we can provide the most useful, relevant, and accurate information about food, creating Internet of Food.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. All right, so that's a wrap. Thank you, everybody, for staying with us. Thank you for staying with us. In a minute, we'll be talking about investing and accelerating in food tech and agri-tech. Thank you, and have a great day.
That is really interesting. What type of spectrography is it?
It's an infrared.
Thank you.